Planning and Land Use Management Committee. I'm Councilmember Weezar. I've been joined by Councilmember Marquise Harris Dawson, Councilmember Mitch Englander, and Councilmember Felipe Fuentes. If we could start on item 11, please. Report from the Director. I think we will note and file, receive and file. And if we could go to item number 1, and our CLA person, Roberto, who went to Cal and just beat Washington State, will announce what that item is.
That's right, and so did you. Go Bears. Item 1, Councilman, is a motion, Ryu Weezar Koratz. It's asking for an ICO for 3 neighborhoods in CD4, Sherman Oaks, Brookside, and Sycamore Square.
Thank you. Do we have staff on this item to just give us a brief overview, please?
Good afternoon. Tom Rothman from the Planning Department. We're aware of the motion that's being referred to staff today, and we've already started a comprehensive neighborhood conservation initiative in the Planning Department. So we're going to begin working on this particular motion anyway while we revise the baseline mansionization and baseline hillside ordinances.
Great, thank you. We have Councilmember Ryu with us today, maker of the motion, and if we could ask Councilmember, please join us, say a few words. Can I speak after? I want to speak after public. Okay, sure. So we'll go through public comment at this time. I'll call 3 up at a time. If you could, can you hear me now? Okay, we'll go through public comment. We'll call 3 people up at a time. If you could please line up, and that saves us time. And you have 1 minute to speak. Barry Johnson, Nancy Segovian, Ron Ziff.
Barry Johnson, Studio City stakeholder, and I was the chairperson of the committee that became the Studio City RFA. With all due respect to Councilman Ryu and his staff, I beg of you all to not adopt the Studio City RFA for these communities. It has failed us, and instead adopt the Beverly Grove RFA, which is far superior. For my own example, adjacent to me, there was a 1,200 square foot home with a 75-year-old oak tree. It was torn down before our RFA, and a 4,400 square foot home was built, nearly 4 times the home that was there. Under our RFA, that home would only be 428 square feet less. It would go from about 4,430 to 4,000 square feet. Our RFA has failed us. Adopt Beverly Groves.
Thank you.
Hello, Chairman and Committee. My name is Nancy Segovian. I'm a 20-year homeowner in Sherman Oaks. I am here today representing thousands of Sherman Oaks homeowners. I have knocked on doors to make them aware of why mansionization has come about from, because Sherman Oaks was left out, and because of that, there's been tremendous developer, aggressive marketing and building in our neighborhoods. People are massively suffering. There's a City Watch article here along with my petition to protect Sherman Oaks, which I would like to present to you. This states that homeowners adjacent to McMansions are suffering at least a $50,000 to $100,000 property loss. It's not fair to inflict that upon communities with deep roots, homeowners who have been there 40, 50, 60 years, including myself. So I have a petition. I'm representing thousands of homeowners, and we are asking you please to expedite these protections for Sherman Oaks as soon as humanly possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm Ron Ziff, Vice President of the Sherman Oaks Neighborhood Council and Chair of its Plum Committee. We'd like to thank Councilman Ryu for authoring this ordinance and for this committee for hearing it. Renewal and replacement of housing has been welcome in Sherman Oaks, but mansionization has been a problem. Overbuilding from lot line to lot line has put box-shaped structures that are eyesores in some parts of our community. And the neighborhood council has got many complaints. In response, we held 4 public meetings. Each was attended by well over 200 people. The vast majority of the people asked for an interim control ordinance to give the planning department time to write new zoning and building ordinances for the 21st century. This interim control ordinance will allow new construction, but it will keep it in scale with our community. We urge you to pass this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Charlotte Gardner, Stanley Enzer, Jan Weiringa. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Charlotte Gardner. I am a homeowner in Sycamore Square neighborhood, and I'm here to encourage the passage of the motion for an ICO for our neighborhood, Sycamore Square. We border other neighborhoods like Miracle Mile that already are getting some protection, and we're getting inundated by developers right now. I live on the 800 block of South Citrus. I've lived in my home for 13 years, and we have a nice 1924 English Tudor home. And right now we have 3 developer-owned homes on our block only, just the 800 block, that they're preparing to tear down and put up big boxes. And so we really encourage you to act now, soon. We want to thank Councilman Rue for responding to our cries for some relief in our neighborhood in particular. And
Thank you.
thank you.
My name is Stanley Enzer. I also live on the 800 block of South Citrus in Sycamore Square. Just to give you a sense of the urgency, 3 properties, as Ms. Gardner pointed out, 842, 801, and 855 are all vacant, all bought up by developers. In addition, 839 and 809 are empty houses waiting to be sold eventually when they're waiting for the price to be right. 842 was just recently demolished. It was an old 1924 house, and they built a 4,400 square foot house on top of it that totally blocks the daylight from the house adjacent. It's an urgent matter. This is the first time I've been to this type of hearing, and I urge you to pass the measure. Thank you.
Thank you. Jan, Tyler Loudon, John Eisen, Vivian Guler.
Hi, I'm Jan Weiringa. I'm a stakeholder, a homeowner in Brookside, and I just simply agree with everyone who has come before me. We urgently need this ICO to save Brookside. We're starting to also be inundated with the developers, and we have a tear down happening starting next week with a giant box mansion going up in a neighborhood that really doesn't have this kind of character in our buildings, and we want to stop it until the mansionization ordinance is rewritten and get some sanity in this kind of development. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm John Eisen. I'm on the board of directors of the Sherman Oaks Homeowners Association. In Sherman Oaks, we have consensus. The Sherman Oaks Chamber of Commerce, the Sherman Oaks Neighborhood Council, and the Sherman Oaks Homeowners Association all agree we need an ICO for Sherman Oaks. The adverse effect of these McMansions is to the adjacent homes, but it's also to the home behind it and the adjacent homes next to the home behind it. So it really affects all the homes around it and all the homes on the block and in the neighborhood. The last point is this: whatever you can do to rush this is critical, because every day that goes by, there's another McMansion that can be built. So let's take care of it now, quickly. Thank you.
Yes, hello, members of the committee. My name is Taylor Loudon. I'm the former board chair and board architect for 9 years of the Miracle Mile North HPOZ. I speak in support of the ICO and agree with everybody's comment previously. Just to add to the comments about Brookside particularly, it's one of the more intact communities where there has not been so much change in the neighborhood, which is just starting to change. So again, the timeliness of this passage is welcomed. And I thank Councilman Rue for fronting this and forwarding it to vote. Thank you for your time and for your consideration.
Thank you. Vivian Carol Lucatel, Greg Pastopino, and Jane Lip.
Hello, I'm Vivian Geller. I'm a homeowner in Brookside. First off, thank you to Councilman Rue for putting forward the motion. Further to Jan and Taylor's comments, we are moving forward to attempt to get an HPOZ within the next couple of years. And of course, we need immediate action. So we request that the committee seriously consider the ICO in Brookside. Thank you.
Hi, Carol Locketel. My husband and I have been homeowners in Sherman Oaks for almost 40 years. I want to thank Councilman Rue for pushing this ahead, and I hope that you will. I am in favor of the ICO for Sherman Oaks. Yay.
Well, I'm her husband. I'm Greg Prestopino, and I too support the ICO. I would just like to, we've lived there for 40 years, and I think one of the things that happens with the development as well is, and I don't know if there's any way to legislate this, to protect old trees in the neighborhood as well as the nature of the neighborhoods.
Thank you. Jane Lip, not here. Jane Lip, Dean Pardee, Richard Platkin.
I wasn't planning on speaking, but I'm going to. I've lived in my house in Sherman Oaks since 1964. 8 years ago, before it became popular, I had a neighbor who was going to build a mansion next to my home, which would have blocked, for want of other things, all the sunlight from 60 trees I planted on my lot. I think we need to look at quality of life and not just financial remuneration from real estate. And I hope this committee would keep that in mind. And I thank the councilman for supporting it as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Dean Pardee, and I'm here to oppose this. I think it's short-sighted and reactional, and I think you should be ashamed of yourself, Councilman, for running on this. I think you guys are ignoring the tax benefits of larger homes. Everyone in here that's opposing it are senior citizens who don't want change, and I think it's time to acknowledge that it's the mentality not in my backyard. And if you oppose any type of, I don't want to call Mansonization, but homes that are over a certain size, you are thwarting the ability to collect tax revenue for schools and other financial implications for people who've lived in areas for 40 years. I agree that there's a certain point, but for example, my property is affected by the Mulholland Corridor Commission, which I go through, and I met every variance and every issue that they've had. And so I'm already going through a scrutinization, and now you're thwarting the ability for us and superseding that.
Thank you.
Again, I oppose.
Thank you.
I'm Richard Platkin. I'm a member of the Beverly Wilshire Homes Association. For 10 years, we campaigned eventually successfully to have a residential floor area district. We initially looked at the Studio City RFA as a model, and after carefully examining it because of its weakness and complexity, rejected it. We developed our own RFA, which has been extremely successful. We have had many new houses built in the last year and a half, about 3,000 square feet, as opposed to 4,350 square feet. And realtor after realtor tells us that home values for older homes as well as for newer homes are all tracking citywide trends, and the new McMansions, or the mini McMansions, are extremely popular with buyers. So I support Barry Johnson in saying the Sherman Oaks ICO should use the Beverly Grove ICO, or the Beverly Grove RFA as its model, and not Studio City, which we rejected in drafting ours.
Thank you. Councilmember Ryu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First and foremost, I'd like to thank the members of the Plum Committee for inviting me here today, especially Councilmember Chair Huizar. Thank you. I'd also like to thank the many community members and leaders that are here today that took time out of their busy schedule to speak. Today I have the privilege to represent neighborhoods and communities in Council District 4 by fulfilling a commitment I made over a year ago. As one of my first actions as councilman, I introduced a motion on July 28th for an interim control ordinance, and I want to thank Councilmember Huizar and Koretz for seconding that motion. The City of Los Angeles adopted an interim control ordinance on March 25th of 2015, offering protection to 15 districts and unique neighborhoods. These neighborhoods span 6 districts and currently offer protection to a few of my communities in Council District 4. Unfortunately, as you've heard today, several neighborhoods within my district were not afforded those protections. And this has resulted in neighbors organizing against out-of-scale, out-of-character, intrusive, and outsized homes. The planning department now is formulating more tailored zoning through updates to the baseline mansionization ordinance and Recode LA. And I applaud them in those efforts. However, many neighborhoods are badly in need of at least a temporary fix or an interim ordinance. And the input and desire from the community has been overwhelming. Whether it's the daily emails or calls, the community outreach conducted by the numerous neighborhood councils, petitions signed by the hundreds of constituents, or the thousands of constituents I've spent months speaking to over the past year, it's very clear that neighborhoods are overwhelmed by the onslaught of overscale, out-of-size development. Without adequate protection and controls, the proliferation of this kind of construction threatens the community. I welcome the recent economic resurgence, but understand the cost such boons, especially in the housing market, can have on the communities. I'm here to advocate for smart and appropriate development that offers the protections communities need, while allowing those property owners and neighbors who wish to update and modernize their own homes to do so within reasonable and sensible limits. I am asking you to support my motion to direct that an interim control ordinance be established to offer protections to the Sherman Oaks community, Brookside, and Sycamore Square. The ICO will prohibit the issuance of building permits for residential structures in the RA, RE, RS, and R1 zones in these neighborhoods unless the proposed structure complies with the regulations set forth by the Studio City Residential Floor Area District. Thank you for your time, council members, and thank you for supporting our neighborhoods as we move in the direction of smart development that improves and secures the fabric of our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Ryu. Are there any questions or comments from colleagues on the committee? No. Mr. Cedillo, Councilmember Cedillo.
Thank you, Chairman Huizar. Thank you. I want to note I was the person who heard this hearing in November or in March 2015 that passed this ordinance, this anti-mansionization ordinance for 15 neighborhoods and 6 council districts. And so I heard the 3+ hours of testimony, and I heard testimony that was pretty evenly divided. And so while it's true that many people support this and they feel strongly about it, there was opposition to this also by many people who felt also equally strongly about it. And I want to note that because this is an interim control ordinance, this is not a permanent matter, because this city is challenged we need about 100,000 units of housing. And what we're doing here is we're creating some type of segregation by zoning. So these 6 neighborhoods and now the neighborhood that you're adding are going to be untouched, right? We're going to protect these neighborhoods, and then the burden and the challenge of building the housing for the rest of the city will fall on the other communities and neighborhoods. In addition, there's a new American family. Much of this housing was built when the city was in a different time period, and the way we saw our families was different. But my observations and what we heard a lot in the last hearing was that a lot of these McMansionizations are really efforts by families who, as we get older, because we're living almost 20 years longer now, many families have to bring their parents back and care for the parents, and they want to change the design and the nature of their house. Many of their children or grandchildren, their millennials, are coming back home, and they want to change the nature and design of their home to accommodate that. It's their property. And so that is some of what's taking place here, and we have to acknowledge that reality. I am a person who will acknowledge that reality. I understand and appreciate all the concerns that have been raised, but I also recognize that there's new realities, and we have to simply accept that and acknowledge that. Those are the choices that we're making. I will defer to the council member because we have a principle in this council where we make those deferences on matters that are local at this time. And so I'm happy to support this. But this is also a citywide matter that will have citywide consequences, and I anticipate and look forward to a fuller and richer discussion of this subject matter when this comes back, as do the others with respect to the ICOs. As it's stated in its title, it is interim, and not final, and not total. And so with that, I'm happy to support the proposal.
Mr. Englander?
It was stated earlier that only seniors support the ICO in protecting their little neighborhood. I just take pause at that. I don't know. I think, Mr. Rue, maybe you're a little older than me, so maybe I can. I don't think you are. I understand the argument that we're looking at citywide issues of a housing crunch. But I also understand the balance of protecting the neighborhoods that were created many, many years ago that, quite frankly, have been passed on with a lot of new families as well. I live in one of those as well. And I also understand the fact that communities are held hostage to local community plans that are antiquated and out of date, and we're far behind. And so we don't have, as a city, the ability to protect a lot of these really slices of the American dream, if you will, that we can enjoy here in Los Angeles without updating those plans. And because of the very litigious society that we're in, it becomes so cost prohibitive today for us as policymakers to work with the community to make sure that those plans are up to date. And the hoops that we have to go through working with the community and making sure that we cross our T's and dot our I's and aren't sued, that we can make sure that where smart planning makes sense and the community's on board, and where those areas of those communities need to be protected, but those plans are far out of date, we've got to do these interim measures as a stopgap to make sure, particularly when we talk about McMansionization issues, that we protect those communities. I was born and raised in the San Fernando Valley, and when you start driving through some of these neighborhoods now, and there's really a big difference between, and the disparity between the needs of what we really have to look at. And I got to tell you, one of the most genius recent motions I've seen put in by a council member was Councilmember Cedillo recently, of repurposing our city parking lots and looking at the ability to build housing above them and still utilize the lower portions for parking. That's all this airspace wasted. Those are common sense solutions where we can have smart growth around transit corridors. Those are things we should look at. At the same time, we have these communities where you're literally shoehorning in houses that don't fit that neighborhood. They have, I mean, it's a complete disruption. But without the tools in place, we have to move forward on ICOs. We have some unique neighborhoods, certainly, where we've done ICOs, and I'm not supportive of the idea and principle of ICOs because they're a temporary measure. That's why they call them an interim control ordinance. What I am in favor of is updating the community plans, and so hopefully we can continue to hire more planners, work with the community, get through this legal environment that we're in, and then looking at a lot of the smart solutions that are before us as well, and I look forward to those discussions this year. So I fully support moving this forward. What I don't support is that we have to keep doing these in every community, and so hopefully we can start updating our plan so we don't keep running into this and chasing our tail. So just wanted to weigh in on that because I think a lot of the statements that were said, there's a lot of passion when it comes to ICOs on both sides of the equation, and it really is just a temporary stopgap measure to make sure that we protect neighborhoods until we can figure out those specific plans and update those in those communities. So wanted to weigh in on that. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Harris Dawson.
Thank you, Chairman Weezar, and thank everybody that came to give us testimony today, and especially our colleague, Councilmember Rue. I expect, like my colleagues, to support this motion as well, but I do want to put to everybody who came out to speak today and to all the members, you know, this tension between what Los Angeles was and what Los Angeles is becoming or has become, I think comes before us day after day after day. And so the reality is the economy that our neighborhoods were built for doesn't exist anymore. And I think a lot of times our tools will treat people who are adding on a room because they work from home, which a lot of people do now, and almost none did before. It treats those people, or people that are building on a room for a parent that needs to live with them, or a new child that needs to live with them, it can treat them exactly like someone who's just making an ostentatious display of wealth. And so I think we got to be very careful about that, and I want to implore everybody who's here on all sides, we need help figuring that out, because these needs and these people are not going to disappear into thin air because we win a hearing or because we win an ICO. This is tough. These are tough questions that our city has to deal with over time, and so I invite you to help struggle with us through that as we do things like this motion today.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, and Mr. Englander, I think the focus also on updating our community plans is so important. A number of items have come through this committee, like the hybrid ordinance, which we recently passed, others, calls a need for us to look at some of our community plans and see what those communities we're envisioning for those communities with some community input. And so it's we're pushing those, and hopefully through next year's budget deliberations we're able to fund more of those community plans for them to get prepared. But for now, on this item, thank you, Ms. Councilmember Ryu, for joining us today, and we will move this item unless there's any objections, and refer this to the planning staff to work with the city attorney to prepare a draft ordinance. Is that correct?
Well, you have two options, Councilman. I don't know if you want to refer the motion to the council for adoption, or if you rather send it to the planning department now. So it's up to the councilman of the district if he wants to send the motion up to the council for a vote to instruct the planning department.
I would suggest that we refer it to the city attorney, but we've seen other instances recently where it's actually the city attorney's office suggesting that we send it to full council first.
Right.
So
it's technically the legislative request under 1232 of the municipal code.
Okay.
So.
Okay, Councilmember Rio, in the past we have held these types of items, directed them to the city attorney, and then they come back to Plum. It kind of goes by quicker, But recently we've been seeing some requests, not from this particular city attorney, but generally in the city attorney's office, that wants first to get the full council to vote on these items before they start drafting ordinances. So I think we would send this to full council just to be consistent with some of the recent practices. Okay. Okay, so
in addition, Councilman, sorry to interrupt you, there were some amendments by CD4 as to the boundaries of Brookside and Sycamore Square, and I think they were submitted to the city clerk.
Okay, and the city clerk has those?
Could you repeat? There were amendments submitted by CD4 as to the geographical boundaries of two of the proposed neighborhoods.
You have them? Okay.
So it'll be as amended, and it'll be a adoption of the motion, and it'll be sent to the council for a vote.
Okay, so we'll adopt this motion and approve the motion, and with amendments, move it to full council. No objections? So ordered. Thank you. Thank you. We are now going to move on to items. We have a few hardship exemptions that we want to hear about on items 2 and 3. Which are a report from the City Planning Commission and proposed ordinance to amend the LASED specific plan, and also we just have two speakers who are in support of that item, so I'm wondering if we could just move that item on consent.
Sure. So item 2, Councilman, relates to the specific plan. Item 3 relates to the development agreement.
Yes.
And I believe city attorney is reminding me that there were some changes that were forthcoming from, I believe, the council office. I'm not sure.
Yes, I think on the LASED specific plan ordinance that the applicant wants to request a modest change to it.
Oh, okay. We'll just hear those items first then. Okay, let's go through those items and call them into order. Then I thought we could just quickly dispose of them. Item 2 and 3, please, if you can read those into the record.
Sure, Councilman. Item 2 and 3, Councilman, relate to proposed ordinances. One relates to the specific plan, and the item 3 relates to the development agreement for the LA Sports Entertainment District specific plan and the proposed development agreement between the developer and the city. And it's to make amendments to the hours of operation as to the sale of alcohol consumption.
Good afternoon. I'm Debbie Lawrence with the Planning Department. The LASED specific plan was adopted in 2001 to facilitate development of a regional sports and entertainment center. The number of alcohol permits allowed and the conditions for their use were volunteered in the plan, and a development agreement was also created to include a community benefits package, and the voluntary alcohol conditions were also added here. So the specific plan amendment involves two requests. First is to increase the total number of permitted on-site alcohol approvals from 30 to 35, and secondly, a modification to allow the service of alcohol to begin at 8 a.m. instead of at 10 a.m. for up to 8 establishments that are allowed for on-site alcohol use. The recommended amendments to the development agreement are intended to make it consistent with the amendments to the specific plan. So additionally, the applicant has requested some minor changes to the text of the specific plan. Staff has reviewed it and we are okay with it. And we recommend the adoption of the ordinances. The district is a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week regional center, and the additional approvals and change in hours of operation for alcohol help ensure that it continues to function as a major event center. And these changes are also consistent with the general plan, the Central City Community Plan, and the specific plan. And the applicant can speak more in detail to the actual request to the specific plan. And it is a change to page 2 of the specific plan ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. So on item 2, Paloma Perez, let's go. Marta Saucedo, please.
Martha is just available for questions, so if you want to start with the council.
Okay, thank you. And does Paloma, are you going to... Okay, go ahead, sir.
That leaves me.
Yeah.
David Goldberg, Armbruster, Goldsmith, and Delphac.
Pardon? Yes, go ahead.
Okay. We concur with Ms. Lawrence's report. The one change involves just the amount of flexibility in the allocation of the 5 approvals. At the applicant's initial request 18 months ago, we had assigned them in a certain way, but over that time we realized additional flexibility probably makes sense. So for 3 of those uses, 1 of them will remain allocated to the cinema, Regal Cinema, for beer and wine. 1 will remain available for restaurant use within the LA Live area. The other 3 had been allocated for the JW Marriott Hotel and Conference Center expansion to particular parcels for those. And our change basically just provides flexibility where if the allocation of maybe we want additional restaurant in the hotel, maybe we don't need to for the Conference Center expansion, this provides that flexibility. In consultation with planning, we realized it just made prudent sense so that if we have to make a change, we don't have to come back for another specific plan amendment.
Thank you. Paloma Perez.
Paloma Perez McAvoy with Council District 9. Good afternoon, council members. Council District 9 has been working closely with AEG on this project for close to 2 years now. We've worked closely in terms of the outreach, extensive community outreach that's been done to get the product that's been here before you today with the modest changes. That's all I have for you today. Thank you.
Thank you. So any questions or comments on this item? Seeing none. So ordered as amended.
So you'll approve the city attorney ordinances as amended?
Approve the city attorney ordinances as amended. Yes. No objections. So ordered.
Or 2 and 3.
Yeah, 2 and 3. Thank you. Next item.
Next item, Councilman, is a general plan amendment and a zone change to construct 90 single-family dwellings.
I'm sorry, we could go to items 5, 6. Yeah, 5, 6, and 7 in that order.
Sure.
And we want to take up the hardship exemptions first, and then we'll get to that item in the. So 5 and 6 or 5.
So item 5, Councilman. This begins the hardship exemptions. Item 5 is a hardship exemption request in CD4 for the property located at 564 North Arden Boulevard.
Okay, I'm wondering if we should just hear public comment or have a presentation from staff as to what these on these individual hardship exemptions, but we'll just go to public comment on these items. Chris Wright.
My name is Chris Wright. I live with my wife, 2-year-old daughter, and 4-day-old son at 564 North Arden Boulevard in Larchmont Village. We really love our neighborhood and understand the concerns regarding oversized homes being built in our area, including one a few doors down from us. However, our renovation is not that type of project. We want to add a bedroom to the back of our house and expand our dining room and kitchen while maintaining the craftsman style of our home. Upon completion, our house would only be 2,100 square feet, which would still be smaller than a third of the homes in our block. With 2 children and relatives living with us to help with childcare, our home is simply too small for my current family. Before spending significant time and money on going down the road of renovation, we considered moving to a bigger house in our neighborhood, but could not find anything within our budget. We don't want to be forced to move from our neighborhood because our daughter receives in-home therapy services from the Lanterman Regional Center due to her G-tube and developmental delays. Our daughter has made significant progress over the past 18 months thanks to the staff at Lanterman, and so we're very sensitive about moving out of their service area. So in closing, we are a growing family with a special needs kid, which has limited options, so we're asking for your help in allowing us to stay in the neighborhood and home that we love. Thank you.
Thank you. Nancy Hickey Danovic, Barry Johnson.
Good afternoon. I'm Nancy Danovic. I'm old. My husband and I have lived at 422 South Citrus Avenue for 43 years now. Apparently, I live in a very desirable neighborhood, and I want you to know that we have spent years nurturing this neighborhood, caring for this neighborhood. We love it very much. The people who have moved into the mansion 2 doors down from me, 3 people live there. It's gigantic. It blocks sunlight. The people who are coming into our neighborhood offering cash and bulldozing homes in a day do not care about the character of our neighborhood, and I don't think they care about my city. I've lived here since 1964, and I love my city. I love its character, and I want to keep its character. I feel like we're being bulldozed by these people who are only out for a buck. I do not oppose the people of CD4, their hardship exemptions. I can understand them wanting to add something to the back of their house. Thank you.
Barry Johnson, Studio City. I have no opposition to somebody who just wants to add a bedroom or so to their existing house. What I do object to is tear downs. So on any of these hardship exemptions, I would be opposed to if they are for a complete tear down. And remember, when you do get a tear down in a new house, all the rooms are that much bigger, but the same amount of people are usually living there. They're just in a bigger house on a small lot. So again, I would just say I support adding a bedroom to an existing house, but no more tear downs, please. Thank you.
Yes, I'm Robert Isley, Los Angeles homeowner and vice president of the La Brea Hancock Homeowners Association. I just learned from Renee Weitzer that the exemptions to the ICO and CD4 items 5, 6, and 7 that I was about to oppose are reasonable, so I am not opposing those. But I am opposing the CD5 exemptions item 8 and 9. Any exemption to the ICO that allows a house more than 50% of lot size is not reasonable. The hardships associated with Mansonization are the hardships they pose on neighbors. And a house is too big when it imposes on its neighbors, disrupts neighborhood scale and character, and violates the city's stated goals and principles. Family size is not the issue. A 3,500 square foot house is plenty big. I was raised in an 1,100 square foot house with 3 older brothers. They're building up to 5,000 square feet on 6,700 square foot lots, and very often 2 to 3 people living there. My neighbor cannot demand a bigger salary than his colleagues because he has a bigger family, and he can't raid my cupboard because he has a bigger family. Regardless of the size of my neighbor's family, he is not entitled to take our air, light, and privacy to house his family in a not necessary but grand style. Thank you.
William Cusman, Richard Platkin, Amy Gallett.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the Planning and Land Use Committee. My name is William Kuzman, and I support this request for a hardship exemption, mostly because I predicted that this was going to happen long ago when I was talking to you about modifying the baseline mansionization ordinance and the restrictiveness of the interim control ordinance for some communities. And since each community almost has a different regulation, it's very hard to follow. In addition to that, when you passed the interim control ordinance, you did not comply with the state emergency code that allows you to circumvent the notice requirement before or after. As a realtor, I'm just devastated that homes are being bought and sold without the disclosure that these homes are currently under an ICO. And it's not the owner's fault that they don't know. I believe it's yours because you didn't notice before and you didn't notice afterwards. And now we have 5 hardship exemptions. I know of 3 more to come.
Thank you. Richard Platkin, Amy Gallaudet.
Richard Platkin from the Beverly Wilshire Homes Association. I've submitted written testimony, and it should be expanded to make clear I'm addressing items 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. We have spent a lot of time, as I spoke before, on mansionization, and I have carefully reviewed this ordinance. I've reviewed the LAMC, and I can find no definition of what qualifies as a hardship. And my suggestion is that no hardship exemption should be considered until the city attorney will tell you what a hardship is and can provide some criteria or even findings to establish a hardship. Now, there's one that, and I'll follow earlier speakers, that we would, however, oppose if and when the definition is provided, and that is in North Beverly Grove. That's item 8, and that actually calls for the demolition, and the applicant posts the demolition permit. The entire purpose of the baseline mansionization ordinance was to restrict mansionization. The ICOs are intended to maintain it, as are the proposed amendments from city planning.
Thank you. Councilmember, I'm sorry, we have one. Welcome. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Amy Galladay. I belong to 3 homeowner associations, and we tried so hard to get this ICO. Now developers are using this tactic to prevent its effect. They use hardship. What about the hardship of everybody around? 2 years of demolition. What about the health? No one is speaking about the health. All this bacterium and fungi is going into the air. We're supposed to buy organic food, but the air that we're breathing every day that becomes airborne is all over the city. Not only that, when you construct these huge houses, you run out of people that can afford these huge houses. Where do the average people live? They have taken away all the affordable housing and building. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Councilmember Ryu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm speaking on items 5, 6, and 7, which are hardship exemptions in my district, and the homeowners are here, and I asked them to hold back and not speak because, as Councilmember Cedillo presented earlier, yes, unfortunately, sometimes there are unintended consequences, but what I want to say is that, you know, in March of 2015, there might have been some contention, but as you could see from the previous item, in the communities in my district, there is unison. There, of course, there are some people in opposition, but majority of the communities are opposed to mansionization. And one clarification, it's not a zone change. It's not that we're limiting people from building more homes because they can't build more homes. It's just that one home we're talking about. But the most important difference between the 3 hardship applications that are presented today is appropriate development. It's not just about size. It's also about character. It's also about community input. And the difference, and the reason why I support these 3 hardship exemptions is the fact that these homeowners did it right. They were planning to build out because their family was growing or their mother-in-law wanted to come and live with them to help with the kids. So what they did was they involved their neighbors. They asked their neighbors about their expansion plans, got their input. They didn't stop there. They went and asked their homeowners association. They got support from their neighborhood councils. And we could share with you the packets, the letters of support that they got from their neighborhood councils, homeowners association, neighbors in support of their expansion plan because it was in character with the community in the neighborhood. So that is the big difference. This is not some developer that's buying a lot, demolishing it, building a big mansion limit to limit. These are actual homeowners who lived in the neighborhood, sometimes for generations, who their neighbors are all fully in support of. So that's the big difference. If everybody in the various neighborhoods did it this way, we probably would not have an uproar. And there would be no need for an ICO or a BMO. But unfortunately, there's no one-size-fits-all solution. I am very much looking forward to Recode LA and updating the baseline mansionization ordinance. But these 3 exemptions, and there will be, someone alluded to, there will be another 3 that I'll be supporting in my district, I believe, next committee meeting. And they, too, did it right. And I can share with you, all the committee members here, letters of support from the various neighbors and communities. So thank you.
Thank you. To kick off the discussion on City Attorney, what is our standard of review or the criteria that we use in granting or denying hardship exemptions from these ICOs?
Well, it is flexible, but you still need to make a finding. You need to find that there is a hardship, and you need to find that there is evidence to support that conclusion. So all these applications are submitting you the facts as to why they want the hardship. So it's up to you to review that and then to determine whether or not the hardship is warranted.
Okay. Well, thank you. In this instance, I reviewed the history of the project, and it's clear that the applicant had been working on this for quite some time before the ICO went into effect. The application also states that the project conforms with the BMO, and so I want to thank CD4 for bringing those facts to our attention, and I would ask that we approve this hardship exemption and move it to council.
Second. Council.
Okay,
so
any
grant the hardship exemption.
Grant the hardship exemption. Yes. Any discussion, objections? So ordered. Okay. Item number 6.
So item 6 is hardship exemption filed by Jesse Williams and Aaron Drake Lee. The property is at 545 North Gower Street in CD4.
Welcome. Jesse Williams and Aaron, actually Jesse Williams.
I spoke on behalf of all 5, 6, and 7. It's the same.
Oh, you did? Okay. Okay. All right. Any discussion on this item? Move it forward.
You'll grant it as well.
We want to grant this as well? Okay.
So that takes us to item 7. This hardship exemption application was filed by Elaine and Josh Brooks for the property at 533 North Plymouth Boulevard in CD4.
Okay.
The third one in the sequence, so you'll grant it.
Okay, and this is the project where the existing footprint of the home, it stays within the existing footprint of the home, and the original lot lines and setbacks will be maintained, correct? Okay, thank you. So any discussion on this? We'll move to, Mr. Sia moves it, we'll second it, and move the hardship, and grant the hardship exemption on number 7. Okay.
Sequentially, item 8, these are in CD5, 8 and 9. Hardship exception number 8, filed by Benjamin Essengine. It's for the property located at 453 North Kings Road in CD5.
Okay, we'll hear this item. Michael Estrada.
My name is Michael Estrada. I live across the street from the property in question, and I'd like to ask that you deny the hardship exemption. I can see from how much work everyone's putting into trying to put together these ICOs, and once it's an incredible compromise after the fact, and once you do have something in place, I think that we should try to stick with it and not grant exemptions. I did find when you were asking what you consider a hardship exemption, I did find something that's not exactly related, but it's from the Bureau of Engineering with respect to the Los Angeles Municipal Code. And they say that the Los Angeles Municipal Code gives the BOE limited authority to modify requirements where extreme hardship would result. Monetary considerations alone do not constitute extreme hardship. I think that's an important consideration in this particular case, because it's the architect who's complaining that because he had personal issues that he wasn't able to get to file the paperwork in time. Well, I mean, I have a business myself. We have hardships ourselves. Most people don't have hardships in their lives, and we can't go back out on our agreements just because we're not able to meet those.
Thank you. Suzanne Horenstein. Barry Johnson.
My name is Suzanne Horenstein. I live right next door. I've lived 27 years right next door to this property, and it's more emotional, I guess. As other people have said, I don't like the change in the neighborhood. And I also don't understand, if you've put this interim control in, why there would be exceptions to it. I thought this was put in to study and find out what direction the city is going to go, since obviously there's going to be changes. I know I'm a senior citizen, but I do believe in some changes. And I just probably would like that explained, why there would be an exception to that, and why this particular house, I mean, they've owned it for 2 years, they've rented it for a while. It has a for rent sign on it again right today. So I don't understand why there would be a hardship based on not getting something in on time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Barry Johnson, Richard Green.
Barry Johnson, Studio City stakeholder. I would just say the same thing again that I said for 5, 6, and 7. No opposition to adding a room, but I would be opposed to any tear downs at this time. Thank you.
Richard Green, Benjamin Isagian.
Hi, thank you for for having us speak. I live on the other side from Suzanne of this house, and we're talking about a lot of trees being cut down in a city that needs more foliage and more trees. We're talking about a street that already has 3 or 4 mansions going up that were started before this ordinance went into place. There is no reason that I can understand to exempt this person or have a hardship exemption. It's just purely a financial matter. When the house was purchased, the owner of the house, the older gentleman who bought the house, presumably for his son, told us they weren't going to be remodeling. They did rent the house for 2 years. There is a for rent sign now. I'm not opposed to remodeling, but this is an old 1920s neighborhood, and there's some beautiful homes on it, and a lot of young families, not senior citizens, live in this neighborhood, and mansionization is ruining the character of both this neighborhood and other parts of the city. Thank you.
Thank you. William Kuzmin, Richard Platkin, Amy Gallaudet.
Hello, my name is Benjamin Asagian. I am the owner of 453 North Kings Road. I purchased this home over 15 months ago with my fiance. I am not a developer. I purchased this home under the idea that I could build our dream home. Nowhere was I ever told, or nowhere did I ever know that we would be under this scrutiny. Yes, the home was rented because we wanted to take our time to build our dream home. As my architect is going to soon speak, that our plans have been worked on for 7 months right now. Over 30 appointments with my architect to build our dream home. I have 8 nieces and nephews, and as council member spoke before, my mother-in-law lives with my family, and I hope that my parents can live with me as well. I plan on living here for a very long time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
William Kuzmin, Richard Platkin, Amy Gallaudet.
Hi, everyone. I'm William Kuzmin again. This has to do with a baseline mansionization ordinance passed in 2008. And again, we're dealing with an issue of the ICO causing a problem for an everyday homeowner. My understanding of a hardship exemption is when a homeowner applies to do an addition or some other modification to his home, and he goes to city planning and he finds out that he cannot do what he plans to do because there was an interim control ordinance put on his property, and that interim control ordinance was passed by this committee on October 21st of last year. So these people, this man 7 months ago, should have known about this ICO. So he could have known that he could have done his plans before you passed it in March. So again, the procedure that this council and this committee used in passing the ICO was extremely poor because you neglected to notify the public.
Richard Platkin. Beverly Grove is divided into 2 areas. South Beverly Grove already has an RFA. North Beverly Grove has an ICO. Both areas have had about 75 demolitions, which have been replaced at houses that are usually 3 times as large with a modern suburban style of architecture. They're all built by flippers and developers. There's no owner-occupied housing in either of these neighborhoods. And the point of the ICO is to prevent demolitions and have them replaced by large, oversized, boxy houses. And if you look at the plans that are submitted in this case, you will see that it is a large, boxy McMansion that is being proposed for this site, and that was exactly the type of house that the ICO was intended to prevent. And we're very sorry that there was a death in the architect's family, but that shouldn't qualify for doing exactly what this interim control ordinance intended to stop.
My name is Amy Gallaudet, and I can only repeat what I said before and only add what Platkin said. As an artist, I am really offended by the type of architecture that has been put in. They haven't even tried to make something fit in any balance. That's one of the things that we learned in art. But they don't care about anything saying all they care about is demolition and destroying, and we are all heartsick. Thank you.
Thank you. Sean Bayless from Council District 5.
Good afternoon, Sean Bayless, Planning and Land Use Guy for Councilmember Paul Koret's office. I'll make this brief. I apologize. Anyway, we fought for an awfully long time to get these regulations in place, and this situation is difficult because it involved the death of someone's family that came very suddenly and caused a great disruption to their family life and professional life. But that being said, we view the exception process as there was an overriding issue, most likely on the city side, that prevented them from submitting those plans. Some kind of issue that you just can't foresee from a city side. And so, it's with a heavy heart, but we don't feel that this reaches the level of an exception request, and understand you guys will make the decision you feel appropriate, but we don't feel it hits that level. Thank you.
Pardon me, I didn't hear that last part.
I'm sorry?
Well, your last sentence, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that.
Oh, so we don't feel it reaches the level of an exception.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion? As we reviewed the application, it is difficult to tell if the proposed project is within conformance of the underlying zoning code, and the applicant makes no mention of the proposed new square footage of the new home, which makes it uncertain for us as to, if we grant the hardship exemption, what exactly will be built there and how large or small this may be, and if it's complying with some of the other zoning codes there. It does mention an unfortunate situation of a personal loss, and although we empathize with that, that does not lead to the level of why hardship exemptions should be granted or not.
The architect saying he filled out a speaker card but wasn't called. I apologize.
I didn't get one.
His name's Ben.
We did not get one for this. Yep.
Perhaps you can let him speak and he'll fill out a card. I apologize.
Sure.
Good afternoon, council members. I apologize, I didn't know I needed a card to speak as an applicant. My name is Ben Brook. I'm the architect on this project and the one filing for hardship on this application. Our application outlines my history with my clients, Mr. Sagan and his fiancée, and I'd like to discuss the lengthy process and extensive coordination we underwent in designing this custom home. We spent a little bit over a year, starting from September 2013, on designing this house, going through scheme after scheme to fit my client's dream home idea, and fervently worked on getting all of our details coordinated and different trades to ensure construction goes smoothly. With a modern home, you can't hide details with ornamentation, so we really were as detailed as possible, and that definitely took a lot of time. So we had to complete all of our interior design and finishes and all of our coordination during the construction phase. This was all completed by the end of 2014, and we were just fine-tuning our plan. And as far as our timeline goes, we were ready to submit before the ICO went into effect in February of 2015.
Thank you very much, sir. You want to finish your thought?
I was told I have 3 to 5 minutes to speak as the applicant.
No, the previous person was an applicant. Right. No, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, given the aforementioned testimony, the reasons were stated earlier, and the testimony from Council District 5, I move that we deny the application for an hardship exemption. There's no objections. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So ordered. Thank you. Item number 9.
Item 9, Councilman, is a hardship exemption application by Alan Sherian. The property is located at 2001 South Selby Avenue in CD5.
Okay. William Cusman, Barry Johnson.
Councilman, Deputy City Attorney Ken Fong here. Before we get into that, is the applicant here? Because I was informed by the city clerk that they have not submitted their affidavit regarding notice. So we need to clear that up first.
Okay, is the applicant here on this item? Nope. Okay.
Okay, so it's up to you. You can hear it today, but there is no notice, and so technically you can't approve it.
So there's no notice for what?
To the neighbors of this item.
Okay, well, why don't we continue this for 1 week then?
Yes,
Yeah.
continue it.
We'll continue this for 1 week. And we'll hold the public comment till then?
Not 1 week, Councilman, one meeting, because I believe next week we're not meeting.
So 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
2 weeks, okay. And planning department's taking notice, taking note that the notice should be given, talk to the applicant about the appropriate notice?
Well, there's staff here from the city attorney's office. So.
Okay. All right, so that will be cleared up. Those technical matters will be cleared up by the time we come back in 2 weeks. Okay, thank you.
Do you want to go back to item 4 in CD 12, Councilman?
Yes.
Okay, so item 4 is the general plan amendment and a zone change to construct 90 single-family dwellings with 94 garage spaces and 18 guest garage spaces at 8500 Fallbrook Avenue in CD 12.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Frank Kwan with the City Planning Department's Expedited Processing Section. Before you is a project and entitlement package of 90 units, 90 new dwelling units. 43 of them will be new single-family dwellings, 47 small lot dwelling units. This along with a 12,900 square foot park site, all on a approximate 14-acre site in the Chatsworth Porter Ranch community. The entitlements include a general plan amendment from very low 2 to low 2 and low medium 1 and OS for open space. The zone change is recommended for virtually the same thing. That's consistent. We have an A1-1 zone changing to RE11-1, R1-1, RD3-1, and an OS. The Commission at their May 28th meeting approved this project and the entitlement package and recommends approval to the City Council. Since then, we've discovered some corrections and clarifications that needed to be made to 3 of the conditions. These are in particular conditions that are underlined in your package. Condition number T, tentative conditions 15, which updates with a DOT letter of October 15. The other 2 conditions are under the Q conditions. Q condition number 3, which is relative to architectural treatment, and Q condition number 6A, which addresses a wall, and these are, again, clarifying language to these existing conditions. The conditions are modifications and corrections are consistent with the intent of the Commission action back in May. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them for you. I'll, again, let the applicant, I believe the applicant's in agreement, and I'll let him speak for himself.
Great, thank you. We'll call up the applicant at this time, Sean Evenheim.
Good afternoon. We concur with the suggested corrections, and we want to thank Councilman Englander and his staff, especially Hannah, for working with us in the planning department, Frank, to get this project going. This is a great project. We work with the community. There is a community park that we're creating, and it's going to deliver desperately needed homes in the West Valley.
Thank you. Mr. Englander, it's in your district.
Yes. Colleagues, this is an interesting piece of property. It was actually owned by, back in the day, the Boeing fitness, the employees actually owned the site together as a fitness center. It had been really underutilized and, for the most part, abandoned for many, many years. the community was always very interested to find out what was going to happen with this. This piece of property is incredibly isolated. In fact, you would never know it was there unless you were going there. It's not a property you could drive by at all. It's at the end of the street, and a dead ends into the only city's nature preserve. In fact, I think some of the properties are going to have some pretty remarkable views of the city's only nature preserve. But through different changes of hands and interest, the community's always been very interested, and we're fortunate that we found a developer who was really willing to work with and listen to the stakeholders, actually meet with the community, make several adjustments and changes throughout this entire process. It's far different from then when he first walked in the door and presented it, based on the response that we got from the community, and including the neighborhood council. And the neighborhood council, particularly West Hills Neighborhood Council, is very vocal and organized and passionate and care a lot about what happens in their neighborhood, and have been delightful to work with California home builders on moving this project forward. So I urge you to support this project and ask for your vote.
Thank you. So moved. Second. Any objections? So ordered. Thank you. Next item.
The item 10 is the last item, Councilman. It's an appeal by Gregory Lewis from Unite Here Local 11. It has to do with two variances. One relates to the FAR, and the second variance to the parking. It's located in CD 14 on South Broadway and 11th Street.
Thank you. Do we have staff on this item, please? Staff here on this item? No.
I thought it was Patricia.
My 9 years on this committee, it's the first time this happens. They're always very good. Planning staff, yes.
Maybe she stepped out. I thought she was here.
Yeah.
Patricia.
Item number 10.
Yeah. Have Sean present it. As he hurries outside.
Why don't we do this? We start off with Gregory Lewis, who filed the appeal, the applicant. Gregory Lewis.
He's the appellant.
The appellant.
Yes.
Welcome.
Hello, my name is Gregory Lewis, and I'm a research analyst with Unite Here Local 11, and I track hotel development across Los Angeles. So the proposed hotel's M&D raises significant legal concerns, as the project's M&D is inadequate with respects to the project's potential traffic and parking impacts, with respect to the project's potential water supply impact, and with respect to the project's cumulative impacts in the downtown area. So I'll start off with parking. So based on the City of Los Angeles' Building and Safety Code, this project is not providing the minimum number of parking spaces required for a hotel. According to at least one expert research paper, hotels do generate parking, a demand for parking. So given the parking requirements for this project, the project's M&D contains no analysis of the impacts on the supply of parking in the area, and such impacts must be analyzed under CEQA. A case ruling on the CEQA states that vehicles, whether driven or parked, in effect constitute man-made conditions and therefore may constitute physical conditions in an area that may be affected by a proposed project, thereby requiring a lead agency to study whether a project's impact on parking may cause a significant effect on parking and thus the environment. Furthermore, to the extent that the lack of parking affects humans, that factor may be considered in determining whether the project's effect on parking is significant under CEQA. So given the LA's Building and Safety Code and an expert research paper and a court ruling, there's a fair argument that this project has the potential to cause parking-related impacts that have not been examined under CEQA. In addition to this, we have also spoken with 14 business owners in the immediate area off of Main Street, which is directly behind the proposed hotel. 14 business owners signed a petition stating that the 8 parking spaces needed for this, that's proposed for this hotel, is not adequate for their business and it may affect their business. And I will submit this to on file. And furthermore, we know that when there is inadequate parking, workers and guests are left open to the threat of assault, robbery, other potential dangers in the area. So in respects to the potential water supply impacts, Governor Jerry Brown directed the State Water Resource Control Board to implement mandatory water reductions in cities and towns across California to reduce the water usage by 25%. In response, the Metropolitan Water District recently ordered a reduction in water supplies to its member agencies, including the City of LA, thereby prompting mandatory conservation. This project's M&D itself acknowledges that the project has potential for cumulative water supply impacts on page 4 of the M&D in section 17, 20, 30, and 60. However, there is no analysis of the project's potential long-term or short-term impacts on the water supply, and such impacts must be analyzed under CEQA. Consequently, there is a fair argument that the project has the potential to cause water supply impacts that have not been subjected to adequate review under CEQA. So finally, the cumulative impacts. The M&D fails to acknowledge or even fails to analyze or even acknowledge the various cumulative impacts and fails to make the mandatory findings of significance on account of such impacts required by CEQA. There are nearly 100 developments happening in the downtown area, including hotels and other projects that will consume water, demand parking, increase traffic, noise, and generate greenhouse gas emissions. Consequently, there's a fair argument that this project has the potential to cause cumulative impacts that have not been subject to adequate environmental review or make the mandatory findings of significance. So in closing, this project makes an inadequate analysis of the potential water impacts, parking impacts, and the cumulative impacts. And this project is one of the many adaptive reuse projects to exemplify the significant legal concerns with the adaptive reuse policy. Thank you.
Thank you. For the applicant, we have two cards submitted as the applicant, Elizabeth Peterson and R.J. Comer. One of you is entitled to 5 minutes, the other to 1 minute. So you guys decide. 6 minutes? Sure. You're very smart. Most people don't figure that out. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, council members. Elizabeth Peterson, applicant's representative, 400 South Main Street, Unit 808, Los Angeles, California. We respectfully do not feel that Zoning Administrator Sue Chang or the Central Area Planning Commission erred in approval of ZA 2014-1439, CUB, CUX, CV, and ZA 2014-1439, CUB, CUX, CV 1A, approving the restoration and reopening of the commercial club. Case building was built in 1924. It is an existing non-conforming building with an existing 14.47.1 floor area ratio. We worked very, very closely to make sure that we met with Civic Enterprises to engage in a detailed parking plan and analysis. The report concluded that there were 5,993 parking spaces publicly available off-site and that there were 3,883 publicly available parking spaces that were attended. The FAR that we increased for some bathrooms on the roof increased by 5,883 square feet. Thus, we were only required to have 8 parking spaces and 4 bicycles parking spaces since the building is an adaptive reuse building and has no parking on site. The entire restoration of this 90-year-old building is being completed per Secretary of Interior state standards. The building has many historic elements and fabric. We're restoring all of them to the original architecture. The Bring Back Broadway initiative is an ambitious plan to revitalize historic Broadway districts and to ensure a vibrant cultural character of Broadway and remains for generations to come. The restoration of this vacant building and the upper floors of the Case Hotel and the ground floors will reestablish vibrancy. This block has been blighted and dark for many, many years. This building has been vacated for about 4 years. We worked very, very carefully with Captain Orb and ABC Vice Coordinators to ensure that the hotel contributed to best practices. We have an extensive security plan. The captain toured the building on several occasions. In fact, he stated that by opening this, we will take a blighted block and make it light, bright, and safe. We have an extensive security plan and camera system. We work with Venaclausen and Associates, the top acoustical engineers in the country, to ensure sound mitigation and quiet enjoyment for all of the property owners. The reservation will comply with LA Green building standards. The Case Hotel is highly efficient and sustainable. The project, both by virtue of its historic preservation and through the incorporation of specific energy efficient and sustainable design measures. The Case Hotel is not expected to unduly add cumulative impact to the 100 developments ongoing in downtown. 20% of those projects are located outside a 1.5-mile radius of Case Hotel. Another 20% have already been completed or will be by early 2016. Only 7 and 8 out of the nearly 100 projects are tailored their construction to open in 2017. On record, we have support of the Downtown Neighborhood Council, the Fashion District Bid, the Central City Association. We've had support from CD14 and LAPD Central Division. It's been a mission of the council member and downtown LA residents and stakeholders to reposition and repurpose these vacant, blighted buildings on Broadway corridor. The reopening of the Case Hotel will remove blight, restore safety, and ensure viability long into the future. The development meets the goals and initiatives that the public and private sector have been identified. Thank you.
Honorable Council members, Councilmember Chair, I'm RJ Comer. On behalf of the applicant, I've got 2 minutes to talk to you about the law. I'm going to talk to you about traffic, parking, water supply, and cumulative impacts. And the biggest takeaway is, in order to make the appellant's argument, they don't just have to make a fair argument, they have to make a fair argument supported by substantial evidence. And their package contains no evidence at all. It's just allegations. Oh yes, there's a drought. A drought is not evidence of water supply impact. Let's go through it. An expert research paper, they say, shows that this building needs parking. No, it doesn't. The expert research paper, the person was an expert in appraising hotels. And they said hotels need parking in order to be valuable. Well, this is an existing adaptive reuse hotel, so that expert appraisal doesn't have expertise in parking or traffic and doesn't have expertise in adaptive reuse hotels. This project meets the CEQA guidelines for the city. The CEQA guidelines for the city say if you meet code-required parking, and under the adaptive reuse ordinance we do, you are assumed not to have a parking impact. And even if you say, okay, fine, you meet code-required parking, RJ, but what about the deficit? Well, the deficit is met by 2,059 spaces within 750 feet of this project. And if you go out 1,000 feet, it's the number that Elizabeth mentioned. Water supply, yes, there's a drought. But the applicant fails to understand that this existing building consumes 3,609 gallons per day. The proposed adaptive reuse design consumes 1,562 gallons per day, almost a 2/3 drop in water supply with this project proposed to the existing building that's there now. All water supply measures mentioned in the appeal are already being done in this hotel. And with regard to cumulative impacts, CEQA doesn't require cumulative impacts for MNDs, and for the reason is that if you don't have significant impacts in your project, you don't have to do a cumulative impacts analysis. But that's just the law. You still may care. Well, do we have a lot of projects out there, and are all they going to be built at the same time, and is this going to be a problem? That's a legitimate concern, but as Elizabeth pointed out, of 96 projects the appellant listed, most of them are outside, 20% are outside the area, 20% have already been built, and the rest, there's mere speculation that they're going to be built at all. So there's no evidence to support this appeal. The appeal should be denied and respectfully submitted. I thank you for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Alice Stanford, Matthew Bem.
Good afternoon. My name is Alice Stanford. I live at 1677 North Lake Avenue in Pasadena. However, I am a worker here. I'm a hotel worker at the JW Marriott downtown here at Los Angeles. And I would like to speak about the lack of the parking being a serious issue. In fact, at the hotel that I work at now, we don't have employee parking, so parking is expensive if you can park there, so most of the workers park in the residential area, a few streets under the freeway there. And what we've found is that it's actually very dangerous walking back and forth trying to get to work. One of my coworkers was on his way to his car one night and was jumped, severely, beaten, and his jaw had to be wired shut. I guess that's all my time. I didn't even look how much I had. Anyway, I just ask you please to have more parking spaces for this project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Matthew Bem. I live in 425 15th Street, Manhattan Beach. I do not want to be here, but these people are my friends. And I work at JW Marriott, downtown Los Angeles. I walk underneath 11th Street on the 110 every other day. 2 months ago, I saw this guy underneath the bridge, with literally a baseball bat hit to his head, and his brains are just bashed out on the sidewalk, man. And it's just weird telling this Los Angeles City Council this. Anyways, as a worker who walks in fears for my safety, I ask that you require more parking spaces for the proposed hotel project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes public comment and
present. The planner
planning
is
staff
present.
is here present. Yes. Can you give us a brief overview of the project and the appeal that's been filed and your review and thoughts on it?
Yeah, thank you, Councilman. My name is Jack Chown, planning staff. Sorry about the delay. This project basically is an adaptive reuse project for the hotel, 140 rooms. The entitlement in front of you is basically alcohol permits and dancing permits for the hotel, and including a zone variance to increase the floor area, and also the parking variances for 8 spaces. I got to clarify that this project, the parking variance, it's inaccurate because the zone administrator actually required off-site spaces within the 750 feet. So the applicant is providing parking spaces. This zone variance becomes a lease in lieu of parking affidavit. So based on my review of this appeal application, the appellant appealed on 2 grounds. One is parking variance, which now becomes erroneous and with no merit because the applicant is providing parking spaces except off-site. Another thing is the appellant is appealing the water consumption issue. Based on the review of this project, a mitigated negative declaration was issued for the project, and water consumption was identified for this project. Water efficient toilets and faucet will have to be installed for the hotel. So the water consumption issue is basically being addressed. So I asked the council to sustain the Area Planning Commission's position and deny the appeal. I'll be available to answer any question that you may have.
Okay, thank you. And so there are how many parking spaces that are being asked for a variance?
8 spaces.
And is that out of the ordinary in projects of similar size in downtown LA? Not to be reused.
If it's an adaptive reuse project, basically they have a grandfather status because the building that was built, let's say in 20s, 30s, and 40s, they do not have any sort of parking requirement. If we require buildings to provide parking per today's standard, then none of this building downtown LA will satisfy that, and then you would not encourage any sort of business activity. So the ordinance states that for adaptive reuse projects, they are exempt from providing parking spaces per today's standard. However, if you are creating new floor area, then you will have to provide sufficient parking spaces per the floor area that you created. For this project, I believe that a basement, restaurant, and lounge was created. Thus, they have to provide 8 parking spaces just to cover the new ground floor area.
Okay.
But again, the applicant is providing spaces, but just off-site. So it's not a parking variance. It's a lease in lieu variance.
So it's off-site.
It's off-site,
Just
correct.
at the location. Okay, great, thank you.
And also that the condition is stipulated as condition number 8 in the original ZA report and also the APC appeal report. Okay.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you. And colleagues, this is a project I'm very familiar with the announcement of our Bringing Back Broadway initiative. We've been looking to attract more retail and hotel usage and adaptively reuse many of our buildings. And core at that has been the idea of historic preservation. And this is a building that is being put back to use, that as many of its areas have been vacant for many years. And so this is actually a good project. With respect to the appeal, the parking issues seem to have been addressed, and the water issues seem to have been addressed. Well, I don't believe that the appeal itself or it's is strong enough to us to deny the whole project. It does ask us, it does shed light on some areas in the CEQA document, the M&D, that I would like Planning Department to review again and make sure that that is sufficient. Some items in the application were brought up that may point to some additional detail that might be necessary in the environmental review. But given that, I'd ask that we move this project, deny the appeal and move the project forward, and that the Planning Department give a double look at the environmental issues that were raised prior to it being heard in council. Okay. Second by Mr. Fuentes. Okay. Any objections? Objections? So ordered. Thank you. Next item.
Public comment, Councilman.
Public comment. William Cusman.
Good afternoon again, ladies and gentlemen.
As a reminder, public comment is to speak on anything that is not on the agenda, any specific item that's not on the agenda. Thank you. Welcome.
Good. My name is William Kuzman. The first thing I want to talk about is a couple of Brown Act violations. I feel that your agenda item today, number 1, was inadequate to describe what was going on. We don't know whether it was an emergency or interim control ordinance, so I'm asking for reconsideration. Also, I submitted speaker cards on items 5, 6, and 7 and was not called. This is an additional violation of the Brown Act. I'm really disappointed that the data used by the Department of City Planning to pass the NCICO interim control ordinance proved to be false when I analyzed it. It said that Old Granada Hills was experiencing a demolition rate 24% higher than the citywide average, and we have 0 demolitions in Old Granada Hills. I haven't analyzed the rest of the data, but I'm sure when I do, I will find significant errors in that CEQA report. So it's time to take a step back and look at what's being done.
Thank you. Ben Barokim. Ben Barokim. Thank you. Ben is not here. Do you want to speak for him, Mr. City Attorney? No? Okay. Just trying to get your attention. Okay. Anything else on the agenda?
No, Councilman.
Okay. Thank you very much, Roberto from Cal. Meeting adjourned.